morning. We're not going to have our normal time of open worship. We're going to go right to the sermon, right? And we have a special guest speaker, so you don't have to listen to me, right? Yeah, all right. So, in the meantime, let's remember to pray for the men coming back from Mexico. They're probably about right now going through customs, and so it'd be great if they all made it through. Right? So, let's pray for that, and let's pray for safe travel back home. So I want to introduce to you Rudy Winkle, and I guess that he's going to finish the introduction. You know, so here's Rudy. Right?
All right. I think this might be a little loud. I don't know. I speak loud. All right, so my name's Rudy Winkle. We have a dairy farm right here in Melba, and I am not a preacher by any means, but I am a servant of the kingdom. I work a lot at Love Inc. And so before we jump into the sermon, I'm going to talk a little bit about Love Inc. So I'm a budget counselor there, which is what brings me here eventually, not to speak about Love Inc., but just so you know where I'm coming from, because when I speak, a lot of times I'll share stories and experiences that I've seen at Love Inc. with budget clients. And so I generally get to speak about money, which is a really hard topic to cover, and a lot of pastors actually struggle with it because the Bible speaks about it so much and so strongly, and yet their income depends on the people in the church understanding the principles of tithing. And so the reason I get to speak about it is just because I have had the opportunity to see God work in a lot of people's finances as a budget counselor. And so, yeah. Love Inc. is very large here in the Treasure Valley. I don't know if you guys knew that. We are the second largest Love Inc. in the world. We have over 5,000 active volunteers serving in Nampa, Caldwell, Melba areas, and it's really amazing. So our Love Inc. here in Nampa is now the largest and only remaining national training site. We have people coming from all over the country every month or two to learn how we do what we do. We work very closely with the Department of Health and Welfare. Matter of fact, the lady that's in charge of health and welfare here in the state of Idaho has toured it and likes Love Inc. so much that she makes it mandatory that every navigator, which are the people that hand out food stamps, all of them are required to come tour Love Inc. and see what we do. And it's making a big enough impact that now we are working with people in President Trump's cabinet because the rest of the country is trying to learn how to help people in need the way we do here in Idaho. So if you're not plugged into Love Inc., I know you guys are a partner church, which is awesome. We always say, if you're not dead, God's not done, and if you are breathing, we could use you over at Love Inc. We have a lot. Right now we have about 50 families going through the program, and once they join the program, we know for sure the more you give stuff to people in need, the worse their situation gets. If you see those people, I mean, I have a heart for people in need, but I know very much that when you see someone begging for money and you give them money, or even if you give them any type of asset or food or anything, you're not helping them. You are hindering them because they learn and teach their children how to abuse the system. And the system right now, there is no one starving to death in the Treasure Valley. We have 17 food pantries up and running and handing out free food with no accountability whatsoever. That does not do a service to those people. At Love Inc., we operate very differently. We give a lot of product, a lot of gas, a lot of car repairs, a lot of stuff, but they have to earn it. They earn it all with a voucher system. They show up, they do their homework, they meet with their budget counselors, they earn vouchers for all those things. We teach classes, mandatory budget classes, and then parenting classes, Bible studies, lots of other classes about boundaries. And so I just wanted to give you a little bit of a summary of how Love Inc. is doing here, and if you ever feel like, matter of fact, I am so passionate about missions, I almost quit the dairy and moved to Spain to become a missionary. And when I went to Spain with my wife and visited the missionary that I was going to be working with, I realized what he's doing is awesome, but what he's doing is not that different than what we are able to do right here in Melba, Idaho. And so I might be a dairy farmer, but if God can use me, he's going to use me, and I'm going to make myself available. And so that's why I'm now the president of the board at Love Inc. And I think I would challenge you to get involved with Love Inc. as a local ministry, as any of you that are passionate about missions. And I know you guys are very closely connected with Mexico, which is awesome. We have a lot of people in need here. And the cool thing is, a lot of times people are like, yeah, it's great to help people in need. What you don't understand is there is a lot of people that are hungry for the gospel that don't want to hear from a bunch of Bible thumpers. That's just the truth. And so I'll give you an example. I have some clients that went through about 4 or 5 years ago, and he was a Mormon. He was a Catholic. She was a Mormon. They didn't agree about church. They didn't go to church. They had heard it from everyone, family, friends, relatives. They wanted nothing to do with church. They came to Love Inc. for financial help, and through that financial help, through that building that relationship, praying with them every week, paying their bills together every week, finally they began to listen and care what I was saying, because I was no longer a Bible thumping, Christian. I was now their friend that cared about them. And since then they've come to church. They both serve at our church now, and they are 6 children, most of which are now baptized. It's really cool to watch God transform lives through loving. So with that, we're going to pray, and then we'll get into this talk, which is always exciting, about money. Heavenly Father, we just thank you so much for your kindness. We thank you for your goodness. We thank you for these people that you brought here to your house this morning to worship you. We ask you to give us open hearts and open minds as we jump into your word, that you may help us to understand what you are speaking. And we ask you, please, just help us to be willing to further your kingdom and to follow your commands. We ask you, please, be with us in this time together. In Jesus' name, amen. So I'm going to grab my phone, and we are going to start with some Bible reading. I like Matthew 6. That is my favorite chapter in the Bible. So I am going to change versions on here, like that. Okay. So this is Matthew 6, verse 1. I'm going to read a little bit at the beginning of Matthew 6, and then we're going to jump to the middle. Matthew 6, verse 1 says, Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. And your Father, who sees in secret, will reward you. I'm going to jump down to verse 19. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. This is going to be our text for today's talk. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So my job often turns into talking about giving and tithing. And so my big point is God does not need your money. My God is powerful enough to further his kingdom without your money. But God needs and wants our hearts. And the Bible very clearly connects your heart to your money in that verse in Matthew 6, where your treasure is, there your heart will be. And we see that all the time. If you know anybody that is actually honest enough to let you see their finances, you will see that he spends money on things that you think is crazy. And you spend money on things that she thinks is crazy. That is because when we spend money on something, no matter what, we often become passionate about that thing. We begin caring about that thing. We get knowledgeable about that thing, because God knows that we are money motivated, and you can easily see it. Where people put their money, they often put their time, their knowledge, their dedication, and it is fascinating to see. As a budget counselor, I get to see a lot of checkbooks. I get to see a lot of different scenarios, and I find that to be very, very true. So having said that, what we're going to do today is talk specifically about tithing. And tithing, like I said, is a tough topic, but a lot of people don't realize how much it is in the Bible. The word money is mentioned in the Bible more than 2,300 times. That's a lot. That's more than the pages in your Bible. Okay? But the word tithing or giving, specifically those words, are mentioned in the Bible more than 800 times. Now that also just sounds like a big number, 800 times. Okay, that's a lot. If you take the entire Bible and you add up every time the Bible mentions Jesus Christ, then you take the whole Bible and you add up every time it mentions prayer, and by the way, add up every time it mentions heaven, and you add all three of those things together, less than 800 times. That's how much God mentions tithing and giving. By definition, all Christians believe in Jesus Christ. All Christians believe in heaven. All Christians believe in and practice prayer. And those three things that all Christians are doing all over the world are mentioned, even when you add them together, less than giving or tithing. That is significant. Because when you look at the Christian church of the world, specifically in America, they do surveys almost every year, over 90% of the Bible-believing, born-again Christians that actually go to church regularly do not tithe. 8 to 12%, depending on the year of the survey, would say yes, they tithe. And even worse than that, in America, if you do the survey and someone actually says, yeah, I tithe, they don't understand the definition of the word usually, and therefore you have to ask them a second question, oh really, how much? That's because when the Bible got translated into English, they didn't do it like many other languages. So I only speak two other languages, Dutch and Spanish. When you look at the Dutch word for tithing, it is their word for 10 with their version of ing. The Spanish word for tithing is their word for 10 with their version of ing. When they translated the Bible, every time the Bible mentioned tithing, it should not have created this word called tithing that nobody knows what it means. They should have translated it correctly, which is tenthing. By definition, the word itself literally is an amount. It is tenthing. It is 10% or it is 1/10. That's important to remember as you think about all these times. We're going to go over a lot of verses that talk about tithing and giving. There is a very, very significant, point of importance in that the meaning of the word is tenthing. Okay, so kind of lock that in your brains as we get to go. Another thing I often talk about is the fact that when people talk about Christian money management, we always use the word stewardship. Right? We've all heard that. That is not just a Christian word, that is in the dictionary, and I guarantee you 95% of you do not know the meaning of it. Because you all think the meaning of stewardship means to take good care of or manage your stuff correctly, or to manage your stuff in a way that is pleasing to God, maybe. Okay? The word stewardship means to take care of or manage someone else's property. Don't miss that. It is someone else's property, and that is because we believe, all of you believe, that your money's God's, right? That's not that hard to believe. But to literally apply it to your financial decisions is extremely hard. And so that's why I talk a little bit about the meaning of the word stewardship, because all of you will acknowledge that stewardship is important. What you have to realize is by definition, you're talking about God's money. And so what really this talk is about, and that's why I found it fascinating, the whole worship time was about trust. Trust in God. And that is a really important thing when it comes to money, because if you ask the 90% of the church that is not tithing why they don't do it, there's one answer that's really, really prevalent. I'd say 99% of the people that will say, no, I don't tithe, then you ask them why not, they all have the same answer. Man, I'd sure like to if I could afford to. And so we have to talk about that. There's a lot of reasons people don't tithe, but that, I think, is the real heart of the issue, is that people really, truly think they can't afford to tithe. And I think that comes from a lack of understanding of God's role in your money. And we're going to look at verses that talk about that, because the Bible is full of verses that talk about the fact that you don't earn your money. God lets you earn your money. Without God's help, you could lose your job tomorrow. Without God's grace, you could lose all your customers tomorrow. God can double or triple your income tomorrow. And so I've had the just amazing experiences of seeing real-life financial miracles because of these principles. And so the problem with when you talk about tithing is almost always, when you hear, a lot of you have heard it like on televangelists or whatever, when they speak about money and tithing, they do something we call prosperity preaching, which is anytime you preach or talk about that you can't outgive God, right? And you encourage people to give because then God will bless them, because that's in the Bible. The problem is when you preach or teach that way, it changes the motivation behind the giving. And the motivation is what matters, because it all comes back to Matthew 6. God wants your heart. He cares about what's in your heart and where your heart's at. And that is where the motivation has to come from. From understanding His Word and His role and applying that to your finances. And that's very difficult to do. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. There's a lot of other reasons people don't tithe, though. other than, hey, I think I just can't afford it. Some churches simply won't teach or talk about tithing because they say, hey, that is legalism. And legalism is anytime you take rules and you attach them to salvation. So there are very legalistic churches. A lot of you are familiar with people that are, in a church that's very legalistic. And when I say that, I mean, anytime you make a rule mandatory, and so, for example, I have a lot of really good friends that are Holdeman Mennonites, but they're legalistic and they know it. And so I just shaved my beard recently. And so if I went to the Holdeman Mennonite church as a man, I'm required to have a beard. And if I shave my beard, I go on church discipline because I shaved my beard. And then if I don't grow my beard back, then I begin really getting disciplined to the point where they will excommunicate me and no longer speak to me because they think I'm going to hell, all because I wouldn't follow one of the church's rules. That's legalism. And tithing is not something that is legalistic at all. You can be a Christian without tithing. You can go to church without tithing. It's a lot more about your heart and the motivation and understanding of God's role in your money. And so don't think that by this talk I'm trying to be legalistic. It has nothing to do with your ability to be saved at all. If you Google, for example, why don't Christians tithe, you'll find a whole bunch of verses that talk about the fact that tithing is Old Testament law. Okay? Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. There was like 713 laws that were mandatory for the Israelite people to follow. Was tithing one of those laws? Yes, it was. It was absolutely mandatory Old Testament law. The thing is, tithing is one of, if not the only, Old Testament law that is confirmed and commended by Jesus himself. And the Bible, in the New Testament, talks about giving and tithing as well. So a lot of the verses we look at will come from the New Testament. So if you're one of those people that struggle with this whole Old Testament idea, I want you to grasp that it was and is Old Testament law, but it is also talked about in the New Testament. So that's important to grasp. So I'm going to pull out my paper so we can start going over some verses. I think that the first place I want to start is a verse in 1 Corinthians. And so I can leave this with your church, so if you want notes, you can get them or look up verses later. But the first verse I want to read is 1 Corinthians 16, verse 2. And this verse says, on every Lord's Day, some versions say on the first day of every week, set aside some of what you have earned during the week and use it for the offering. The amount depends on how much the Lord has helped you to earn. I think that's important, especially that last line where it says, the amount depends on how much the Lord has helped you to earn. Because the amount changing is common sense if you're thinking about a percentage, right? If you make more, God expects you to give more. But where that verse says, the Lord has helped you to earn your money, is so important that you grasp that, because so many people struggle with the fact that they can't afford to surrender their money to God. And let's face it, Christians are good at surrendering to God. We surrender our health problems to God, our marriages to God, our emotional health to God. Someone's sick, everybody's holding hands and praying. We are awesome at surrendering things to God, except our money. When it comes to paying bills and barely making it, you don't pray. You don't think about God. God's the first place you kind of try to steal from to make ends meet on the other side. And the reason I feel so strongly about a verse like this, about getting over that hurdle of thinking that we earn our money, because the reality is, we get our college degrees, we set our alarm clocks, we show up at work, we do everything we're supposed to do, and because of all those things that we did, we feel like when we get that paycheck, we earned it. As long as you think you earned it, then you can't get to the point of realizing that God gave it to you. Without God's help, you wouldn't have had that paycheck. Without God's help, you wouldn't have the job that you have, or the benefits in life that you have, the blessings that you have. And so I'll tell you a story. The first time I ever saw some Christians surrender their money to God was probably 13 years ago. It was when Love Inc. was still at Nampa Church of the Nazarene Karcher. At Karcher Church of the Naz, I had a Nazarene couple from Boise, that told me that now that they're in Love Inc., they want to start tithing for the first time in their life. And this was way before I knew anything about tithing. I hadn't studied it. I didn't know anything. I said, okay, well, that's great. This was the very first night I met them, and I'm becoming their budget counselor, and we get to know each other a little bit. We pray, and then they tell me this story about how they want to surrender their money to God and start tithing. And I said, okay, well, I need to look at your budget. So I started looking at their budget, because by then they had a written budget, and I'm looking at it. They're self-employed artists. She's a real artist that draws pictures for a living, and he's a music artist. And he made about $1,000 a month. No, maybe $1,500 a month. And she made part-time about $1,000 a month. So that's $2,500 a month coming in to their family budget. Their house payment was $1,700. One of their car payments was $300. The other car payment was another $300. So if you're following me with the math, we're now up to $2,300, and all they paid for is their house and their 2 cars. And they only make $2,500. So there was $200 left for everything: gas, food, groceries, insurance, garbage, sewer, you name it. Everything for $200. And I looked at their budget. On top of all that, they had $40,000 worth of credit card debt. Unpaid old credit card debt. And I was like, whoa! I said, listen, folks, I think it's great that you want to surrender your money to God, but you need to get on top of your finances. We probably need to sell this house. We need to sell at least one of the cars. We need to figure out ways to increase your income. We got to fix your budget, and then you can start tithing. Because you can't afford to tithe right now. It's impossible. It's mathematically impossible. There is no way we can squeeze $250 of tithe money into this check, into this budget. Ooh, that was the wrong thing to say to that lady, because she stood up, literally got up off her chair, put her hands on her hip and said, what kind of budget counselor are you? Listen, if you think you're going to stop us from tithing, I will go straight to the staff and demand a new budget counselor, because God is in control of our money, and it is time for us to do what he asked us to do with our money. And I was like, oh, mama, these people are crazy. Like, I literally said, this is not a smart decision. This is financial suicide. You cannot do it. But I tell you what, if you feel that strongly, I want you to take this week, I want you to go home, I want you to research tithing, I want you to pray about it, and I want you to come back here next week. And if you truly think it's time to tithe, then I want a plan, a written plan of how you're going to start tithing. They said, okay, and they left. So the next Thursday night, they're back at Love Inc. again, and they look at me, and they said, well, we're ready to start tithing. And I was like, what? Like, I literally thought God would change their mind and show them that you got to be on top of your money first, and then later you can afford to tithe. But no, that didn't happen. They felt just as strongly that they needed to start tithing. And I said to them, well, I don't think that's possible. You only have $250 in your account, so how are you going to make a $250 tithe check? Oh, we already looked it up. We have $250.39. So we want to make our first tithe check for $250. And I was like, then you'll have 39 cents left over until next week. And we have to do stuff like, how are you going to, you'll be broke. They're like, well, we know, but God's in control and he'll take care of us. And I was like, wow. I said, that is not okay with me, because you were supposed to give me a written plan. Oh, no, we got the plan. And she pulls out the written plan. The plan is to pay the house that whole month. You know, it's a monthly budget. They want to pay the house payment, one of the car payments, and half the Idaho Power bill. And that way we can make the rest of the budget work and have a tithe check in there. And I was like, that is not a plan. Like, what about the credit cards? What about the other car payment? What about this? And they're like, stop worrying about it. God will take care of us. And I was just, whatever. I mean, I was literally whatever. I let them do their $250 tithe check that Thursday night. The weirdest thing happened that week, because on Friday, the next day, they didn't even give their tithe check till Sunday, but on Friday, she got an email from someone that had been surfing the web, and they found her blog spot where she shares all her artwork with out-of-state friends and family. And this someone happens to be an upper executive at Tommy Bahama clothing line, and they love her artwork, and they emailed her asking if they could hire her to do some original pieces. And she's like, there's no way I can move to California. I got a new baby, and I'm, in this financial program. And they're like, no. You stay in Boise, Idaho. You're going to be on the honor system. You keep track of your own hours. Once a week, we want you to email us with your hours, and then attach the documents, the PDFs of your artwork. And that way, we can see the artwork, and we would like to have you actually write a little thing where you're licensing that artwork to us, so we have the right to print it on the front of Tommy Bahama shirts. And she's like, okay, sure. So she starts drawing for them. I didn't know this because I had only seen them that Thursday night. She starts drawing for them on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And then when they came back the next week, they're all happy and excited. They're like, well, we had the best week ever. And I was like, okay. And they start sharing the story about the Tommy Bahama lady. And I was like, you know, if it sounds too good to be true, it is too good to be true. And I was like, well, okay, so how is this exactly going to work? And what are they going to pay you? And she's like, oh, they're going to pay me $100 an hour. And I was like, oh, mama, like I was thinking it was a scam or something, because $100 an hour, or maybe it's a typo and it's supposed to be $10 an hour. And finally she's like, well, I don't know why you're so nervous. I drew for them all weekend, and we emailed them on Tuesday, and they wired $2,000 into our account, and it came at midnight last night. And I was like, what? Like, she did 20 hours over the weekend and made $2,000 in a couple of days of doodling. And I'm not kidding, she doodled. That was what she did for a living. Doodling at home in Boise, Idaho for $2,000. That was the first financial miracle I'd ever witnessed. And that was also the first family I'd ever seen truly decide to surrender their money to God. And I started putting two and two together. It was fascinating to watch. She began part-time making $8,000 a month for Tommy Bahama. We attacked credit cards. We paid off the cars. We saved a lot of money. It was awesome to watch God work in their life and watch the transformation that happened, not just spiritually and with the relationship and communication, but financially, to watch the miracles, one after another, at all, I think, because of this surrendering of their money. It was fascinating to me. So, I think one thing I want to say about tithing is where you give your tithe is very important, because it matters to only you and God. That's important, okay? Because some people feel very pressured that it can't count as a tithe unless it goes to a missionary, or it doesn't count as a tithe unless it goes to your local church. Some churches even teach that. Some churches it's mandatory. What matters is what God lays on your heart. You should want your tithe dollars to further God's kingdom. And that matters a lot. So if you go to a church that's an effective ministry in its community and they manage money well, I think, you know, you should, with confidence, give that tithe to that church. That's awesome. But that's not always the case. I have a bunch of clients that choose to tithe for the first time in their life, usually, and I'd say half of them don't go to church, at least in the beginning. And so, I mean, I had some that sponsor orphans in Africa, and I had some that give all their tithe dollars to the Boise Christian radio station. Like, there's no such thing as right or wrong, because it's between you and God. The Bible teaches something called Storehouse Title. And so that's why, like the Nazarene Church, for example, teaches that it doesn't count as a tithe unless you give it to your local church, period. And that's because, way back, the temple was the storehouse. That's where they brought all the extra, the increase, the first fruits, all came to the temple, and they stored it up to help people in need. And when they were done helping people in their community, they brought the excess to the really needy people in Jerusalem. That's the way it worked, and as time has progressed, that's why a lot of churches still teach the importance of supporting your local church. And we see verses like this one in 1 Corinthians that say, on the first day of the week, set it aside, bring it as an offering. Well, we go to church on Sunday, and we worship God, and we bring an offering. That's part of our worship to God. And so there's a lot of places where you can say, hey, yeah, that's what I'm seeing. That's what God is saying. But I want you to really take home that it is between you and God. If you feel led to, I mean, I had a guy one time, his dad was a missionary in Mexico. All of his tithe dollars went to his own dad, which sounds crazy. But wow, they were financially very blessed by God. And so I don't buy it when people say, oh, no, it's got to go to their local church or it don't count. Because I've seen it many, many times where God richly blesses and guides people that are not tithing to their local church for one reason or another. But there is a lot of biblical reasons why you should and could tithe to your local church. The next one I've got here talks about the attitude. And mostly we see that in the New Testament a lot. God commands us to tithe, but he always looks at the heart behind our giving. So some of the bullet points under that say, do not tithe because you expect something in return. Because that is often what happens as people teach about it. They really just start feeling like, oh yeah, I got to do it so that God will bless me. Don't do it. I'm telling you, if you can't do it happily and cheerfully, then don't do it, because you're wasting 10% of your money, and nobody can afford to waste 10% of their money. It has to be something that you choose out of the goodness of your heart. Don't tithe because you feel fearful or obligated, like you just got to, because that changes the motivation. The motivation is not about that. Tithe because it's not about what you're giving up. It's about what you get to keep. Just remember, throughout all of your finances, God owns it all. How much are you choosing to keep? And so I think this verse in 2 Corinthians, Paul speaks so strongly about this. He says, each of you should give what you have decided in your own heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And I think that's really, really difficult to do, especially because money is the only area of your faith that absolutely is truly tangible. It's mathematical. You get to see it flowing in and flowing out. You get to make choices with it. You physically have to write a check or make a transaction. That's very, very different than every area of your faith, because faith is so, is believing without seeing. But money is one of those things where we are called to have faith with regard to our money, but you can't believe it and not see it because you see it. Every 2 weeks when you get your paycheck, you see it. You make choices where that money's going to go, and then you watch what happens after that. And so what I find fascinating, like sometimes I'll describe it like this. You just pretend that this church is like the whole world, okay? And there is nobody outside of this church. And I am a multi-billionaire. And I have all the money in our little world, okay? And all of you work for me. And as soon as I hire you, today I'm hiring you, and I say, here is your November wages. I'm prepaying everybody $2,000. That's your November wages, okay? And then I give you the employee handbook, a big fat book. And in that book, I say over 800 times that I don't care about your work ethics. I don't care what time you get up. I don't really care what you even do. I gave you this first money as a test, and I'm going to watch what you do with that money. And I am going to care what you do with that money. And specifically, 10% of that money I'm not even really giving to you. It's mine. It's just part of the test. And I didn't say that once or twice. I said it over 800 times in the employee handbook, and we all go out this month. I guarantee you that some of you have more than $2,000 worth of bills, and therefore you feel like you need all $2,000 to make it through this month, right? And so here we go, we fast forward to December 3, and it's now the next payday, and I say, hey, how many of you didn't even open the employee handbook? How many of you opened it and scanned over it but didn't really notice much? How many of you looked at it and saw that I talked a lot about the fact that 10% of this money wasn't really yours, it was mine, and I was just doing a little test with you? And now, by the way, I am handing out new wages, and there is no rule that says I have to give you what you earned. I get to give you whatever I want. Now, how many of you think I'm going to equally distribute $2,000 to every person in this room here? No way. Because some people blatantly disregarded every rule and command and request that I gave in the employee handbook. Some people didn't even read the employee handbook. Some people completely ignored or did the opposite of what I said in the employee handbook. And so guess what? I could give you 100,000. I could give you nothing. I could give you $1 million. I don't care. I'm a billionaire. All I'm doing is watching what you're doing with your money and rewarding you accordingly. If you doubt that, start reading the Bible. There's 39 parables in the Bible. Jesus teaching his people. Over half the parables are about money management, tithing, giving, and stewardship. Over half of the 39 parables talk about the fact that God and Jesus care what we do with our money. He's watching, he's actively watching what we do with our money, and he's deciding how much we deserve next month. And the reason I can say that so firmly is because I'm not your pastor. You cannot fire me. I'm a volunteer. Right? I really don't care. It is my job to try to get you to grasp what the Bible is saying. God cares what we do with our money. It's not just a little bit in there. It's in there a lot. We're going to look at some more reasons to tithe in the Bible. God flat out commanded it many times, but in Leviticus 27, verse 30, it says, a tenth of the produce is the Lord's and is holy. We don't think about that anymore. We're not Catholics. We don't think about holy items anymore nowadays in the Protestant Church of America. But the Bible literally says 10% of all your money is God's and it is holy. We don't think about that when we get a paycheck. You get a paycheck for $2,000, you think you earned that $2,000, you got to go pay some bills. God says you get a paycheck for $2,000, 200 of those dollars just became holy. They are his. They are set aside for him and his kingdom, and it is holy money. That's literally in the Bible. We don't think about it, or we don't read it, or we don't study it. I don't know. I don't get it. But I know what the Bible says. And everybody does this differently. Like some people, they set up an account at their bank, a savings account, but it's God's account. And every deposit, they move 10% of that deposit straight to God's account. And other people, every time they get a paycheck, they turn around and write a tithe check. You know? And other people, like, I have notes on my phone. Because sometimes, like, I sell bull calves or whatever, and someone will pay me $200 for bull calves. I gotta go get on my notes and write that I owe God $20 because I just made $200. I literally do that because I literally believe that 20 of those dollars are holy money. It's God's money, not mine. He gave it to me and I'm thankful for it, but I'll forget. I'm just forgetful. I'll forget if I don't add it to the notes in my phone. Like, it's really fascinating to me how literal some of these commands are. Jesus commended it. So this goes back to the whole Old Testament thing, but in Matthew 23, he did it again in the book of Luke. It's the same story, but it's when Jesus was talking to the Pharisees and Sadducees. And those were the guys that were going around bragging about how good they are. They follow all the rules. They help all the people in need. And they pray on the street corners. And they tithe. And they do this. And they're like kind of listing how good they are at being Christians. And Jesus just stops them in their tracks. And he says, yes, you should tithe. But you shouldn't leave the more important things undone. And then he talks about this is why it's not legalism. Jesus doesn't say, yes, you must tithe. It's mandatory in my New Testament kingdom. But he does say, yes, you should tithe. And then he has to talk about what it means to walk with him. And we don't see that. I mean, if Jesus could come and talk to his church today, he could not commend us for tithe. We don't do it. 90% of the Christians are not doing it. Jesus can't stand in front of us and commend us for flat out disregarding his commands because we don't do it. Let's keep going. Tithing demonstrates God's lordship in your life. This is a verse in Deuteronomy 14, verse 23. The purpose of tithing, and I love this verse because a lot of people like, about this point in the talk, they're like, this guy's trying to say that I just got to surrender my money to God. I got to start realizing that God's role is real in my finances. The purpose of, God knows what he's doing. He is not messing around. The purpose of tithing is not so that you will surrender to God. The purpose of tithing is to teach you always to put God first in your life. That's what it does. Because when you start surrendering your money to God, go back to the heart. Where your money is, there your heart will be. When you surrender your money to God, he doesn't care about your money. He wants your heart. And because of your money flowing into his kingdom, you now begin caring more about his kingdom. Your priorities in life begin to shift. And it's just one more verse. Yeah, it's an Old Testament verse in Deuteronomy, but it says the purpose of tithing is to teach you how to keep God first in every other area of your life. And to be honest with you, that is my favorite part of being a budget counselor. I have a lot of clients that make a lot of financial headway. I mean, a lot of them, they'll pay off $20,000, $30,000 worth of debt in 1 year. A lot of them will change their net worth by $50,000 in 1 year because they're managing their money good, because they're making good decisions, because we're paying bills together on Thursday night. I don't care about all that. It's just some finances. I love watching God transform their relationship. And like a lot of them, because they're tithing, are actually going to church for the first time in their life because they don't know where else to give a tithe check. Like a lot of them are now getting along for the first time in their life. They're communicating for the first time in their life. Their life is being changed by the Holy Spirit. And I believe that I am very blessed to be able to watch that happen. And it's not happening because of Love Winkle, because of me, or because of lots of prayers. It is happening because for the first time in their life, they are invested in God's kingdom and he's changing them. And when he changes them and their motivation, the rest of the stuff falls into place. Tithing expresses gratitude to God. Deuteronomy 16. This verse is interesting because it's more of an imperative form command. It says, each of you must bring a gift in proportion to the way the Lord has blessed you. Not optional, not a suggestion. You must do it in proportion to the way that God has blessed you. But the verse, this whole bullet point is about gratitude, and I didn't write this stuff, and I don't think that verse talks as much as we need to talk about the thankfulness side of things. If we truly understand that our money comes from God, then the thankfulness side of things automatically starts coming out. And so I actually have seen this in real life. I'll tell you a story. Yeah, we have time for a story. Okay, I had some budget clients once. This was probably 7 years ago. They were an unmarried couple from Boise, and we were meeting at Nampa First Christian Church. That's the one by Albertsons there on 12th and 7th. And so we were meeting downstairs in that church, and they, boy, they were interesting. He was born and raised Catholic. She was born and raised Pentecostal. And because of that, they didn't get along at all when it came to church, at all. So they didn't go to church. But I would talk to them, you know what I mean? And they had heard this class that I teach, which is advanced budgeting, and I talk about tithing in that class. And they just, you know, said, hey, we can't afford to tithe, but we don't really go to church anyway, so we don't want to do that. We want to attack our finances. And I said, okay, fine. I mean, that's between them and God. I never pressure people into giving. It is between you and God. And so I said, okay, good. Well, let's keep, you know, so we start going. We start paying the bills. We get organized. We get written budgets going. Well, I'll tell you, their relationship was getting better. Their communication was getting a little bit better. Some of the problems in life seemed to be getting a little bit better. But their finances were a disaster. It was one thing after another. Like, first there was a car accident, then there was a traffic citation, then their car's engine blew up. I mean, it was just one thing after another just going wrong, but that's how their life was, always. It was always one thing after another, so they thought it was normal. I didn't think it was normal. I was like, this is a disaster. So meanwhile, as I'm building this friendship with them, I'm talking to them about church, and then I started putting two and two together and realizing they were kind of a little bit open-minded to church. And so I actually suggested, maybe a little bit pushed them to go to Eagle Christian Church because they do communion every week at Eagle Christian. And as a Catholic, he would like that. It's respectful and people are dressed up and pretty liturgical, which he would like as a Catholic. But it's very spirit-filled, which she would like as a Pentecostal. And you know, they have a Saturday night service, which they needed because of work schedules. And so they went to Eagle Christian Church on a Saturday. They loved it. It was totally their style, and they wanted to stay anonymous. Like, you can't show up at Bible Friends and people not say hi to you and know who you are, right? Well, some people don't want you people to know who they are. They want to stay anonymous, and that's how this couple was. So they loved it, and so the next week they're like, hey, we actually love Eagle Christian. We want to start going there every Saturday night. We know we still can't afford to tithe, so you know, we'd like to do a $20 check. They called it a tithe check, and I was like, okay, whatever. So they did a 20, and then a couple weeks later they do another 20. One time they even did a $50 tithe check to Eagle Christian Church, but it wasn't a tithe. It was a great donation. It was a gift, and it was from the heart, and it was cheerful. But financially, their life sucked. And when the car's engine blew up and we had to replace the car, it cost a lot of money. It required taking on more debt, which is not even allowed when you're in loving, so that made them have to go into non-compliance, and I had to fill out these forms, and they get talked to, and it was not fun, not good. And everything just kept going bad financially. And then he was getting in trouble for sleeping in at his job, and he was placed through a temp agency at this plastics company, and he's like, it's my dream job, I want to run that company someday. And I was like, well then stop sleeping in! Like, you gotta be kidding me! So I had this guy setting 3 different alarm clocks so that he would actually get up and show up at work on time. Well, 2 weeks later, here he comes. Head hang low, and I'm like, oh, what's going on? Well, my kids had friends over on Friday night, and it was too loud, so I put my earplugs in, and I slept through all 3 alarms. And I looked at her, and I was like, what about you? She was sleeping right next to him with no earplugs, and she slept through all 3 alarms. He shows up at work late. The boss was furious, fired him on the spot. I was like, how in the world are we going to survive on only her waitressing income? And then I just flat out looked at her and I said, how's things going at the restaurant anyways? Because if you haven't noticed, we are not making headway. We are spinning backwards, and it's one bad thing after another bad thing after another bad. Oh, don't worry about me. I've been a waitress at that restaurant for over 20 years, and I'm the best they got. And she's real arrogant like that. And I was like, oh, Mama, I can already see the writing on the wall. Well, sure enough, so he starts going out looking for work and sending out resumes and going, you know, door to door anywhere that he and go back to the temp agency. 2 weeks later, here they come. Heads hung low once again. And I'm like, what's going on? Well, you're never going to believe what happened. But the new busboy at the restaurant was stealing all her tips. And she got sick of it, and she went to the boss, and she let that boss have it about this idiot new busboy and how he was stealing her tips behind everybody's back. And she didn't know it, but the new busboy was the boss's nephew. And the boss took the nephew's side, and bam, no more job. So here they come. No job at all, and I was like, okay, so there's no income. I don't create money. I'm a budget counselor. I help you make decisions with the money you guys are making. I don't know what to do or where to go from here. Well, they're like, she was literally in tears. He was practically in tears, and they said, well, here's the deal. We figured it out, and we need enough gas to get to Eagle Christian on Saturday night, and we need enough gas to get back here to Nampa on Thursday, and we need to pay our cell phone bills so that we can take any calls if we get any job interviews. And so we added it all up, and we need $80. And they were just real specific. They had this whole list of things written on a notebook sheet, and it added up to $80. And I think they were doing that because they really were trying to pressure me into giving them $80 cash. And I can't do that. I am not allowed to do that, right? So I said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to pray. And we sat on a little round table. There's like 30 other meetings going on all around us. And we just held hands together, and we prayed hard that God would take over their finances, that God would show them He's in control, that God would find a way to give them $80 that week, and that God would help them find new jobs. And I never thought I knew what would happen. I didn't know what would happen. And so the weekend started, and they went to Eagle Christian, and then Monday morning, their doorbell rings. And their doorbell, they go answer the door, and there's a friend of theirs from Love Inc. that was about to get a budget counselor, and she's like, listen, I'm going to get my budget counselor, and then I'm not going to have any extra money, so I was able to save some money out of this last paycheck, because I heard you know how to do tattoos. And this is what I want right here on my thigh, can you do it? And he's like, hop up on the dining room table, you bet I got the stuff. And I was like, is that even legal? And he's like, well, I think you have to have a license, but here's the deal. She only had $80 cash. So we didn't care that tattoo was worth like $300. We gave her the tattoo on the dining room table, and she gave us $80, and we know that God sent that money to us because of our prayers on Thursday night, because we prayed for 80 because we needed 80, and guess what? She only had 80. And I was like, okay, awesome. Like, I mean, I'm used to these kind of weird stories, but then the weirdest thing ever happened. He got real quiet, and he said to me, you know how we thought we needed all 80? We figured out a way to save some gas, because we took one of those 20s down to the credit union, and we deposited $8, because we want to make an $8 tithe check to Eagle Christian right now. We know that that money came from God. It had nothing to do with us, and we know that without God, we would be nothing. We have already hit rock bottom. We have no money coming in. We needed all 80, but we really don't. We need 72, because 8 of it is God's. And they made an $8 tithe check to Eagle Christian Church on a Thursday night. And what fascinates me is on Saturday, 2 days later, his boss from the plastics company called him back and said, you'll never believe what's going on. The whole department is falling apart. We need you back. We don't want you through the temp agency. We want you back full-time on salary. You can set your own hours. Please at least try to get here by 10 a.m. You got to take over the department. And I was like, what? Like, I'm an employer. When you get rid of the sleeper inners, you are happy they're gone, right? And all of a sudden, this guy gets a call back and gets almost double, almost triple his wages at his dream job. I literally believe because of an $8 tithe check. The amount doesn't matter. They've done 20 and 50 before. The amount doesn't matter. It was the motivation. Finally, they realized that God's in control, and it was a stupid $8 check to Eagle Christian that transformed their financial life. And I'm not kidding. He got his first huge paycheck. What do you think the first thing they did with that sucker was? They made a tithe check. They gave it to Eagle Christian, and within 2 weeks, she got a new job at a better restaurant with better tips right here in Tampa. It was amazing. Okay, now, this all happened like 7 or 8 years ago when the economy was horrible. Okay, maybe it was 10 years ago, I don't know. It was right after the housing thing, because we had like 7 or 8 families at Love Inc. that were all college educated, awesome people that could not find work because of the way the economy was. This couple, both of them convicted felons. Both of them recovered meth addicts. He was still a struggling alcoholic. They were covered in tattoos and piercings. They had no college degrees. These people were virtually unhireable. And they both get awesome jobs within 2 weeks because of an $8 tithe check. You don't earn your money. And if you think you do, you better back up, because your bad times are coming, I promise. God is giving you your money as He watches you manage your money, and He will decide what you deserve or don't deserve in the future. I've seen it over. Like, I've shared 2 stories so far. I guarantee you I have more than 20. I can't share them all. I am sharing ones that really, really blew my mind, watching how real God's role is in our finances. That $8 was a true gift of thankfulness. It came from the right motivation, from the right heart, and God used it to transform Bible. We are robbing from God if we refuse to tithe. So now the next couple bullet points are from Malachi 3. And so I don't talk that much about Malachi 3 because Malachi 3 is where prosperity preaching comes from. Okay? Because it's in the Bible. All right? So listen to this verse. Will a man rob God? Yet you rob me. And then you ask, how do we rob you? In tithes and offerings. The Bible literally says that if you can't afford to tithe, or if you don't tithe because you don't think you can, you are stealing from God. Okay, but Malachi 3 goes on. And it says, bring all the tithes into the storehouse so there will be enough food in my temple. If you do, says the Lord Almighty, if you tithe, I will open the windows of heaven for you. I will pour out a blessing so great, you won't have enough room to take it in. Try it. Let me prove it to you. In the NIV version, in that verse, God says, test me in this. And there's other parts of the Bible where we are told not to test God, right? But this is the one time, the one thing in the entire Word of God that we are not only told, we are commanded to test Him. Put Him to the test. Because it's measurable, it's manageable, it's mathematical. You make your money decisions, and you get to watch it come in and go out. It's so awesome that something so real is so directly connected to our faith. And what fascinates me is that there is so many Christians, they don't have a chance to see God working in their finances because they don't give Him a chance. It's fascinating to me to see how many young, Christian, awesome families are out there struggling to make it. They're just struggling to make it. In our society, debt is normal. We take on debt left and right. And we have house debt, and we have car debt, and we have... The average family in the Treasure Valley right now has $7,000 of unsecured credit card debt. And we just think it's normal because of our society. We're raised with it, and we think it's okay. And we think it's normal. It's not normal. It's not even normal in other parts of the world. But here in America, it's viewed as normal, and we have all these families that are just, they're making it, but barely. They're paycheck to paycheck. One bad thing happens, and it's a disaster. There's no emergency fund. There's no savings account. There's no retirement plan. Half of them, there's no health insurance. I mean, it's unbelievable. If you find yourself in one of those shoes where you can't afford to tithe, you don't have health insurance, you don't have life insurance, you don't have a plan for if or when you die, you don't have a plan for retirement, but you're making it and you think you're doing just fine, you're not doing just fine. You need to come loving. Okay? That's what loving's all about. It is a whole bunch of nice, awesome, young, normal Christian people. It is not borderline homeless people at Love Inc. Half my clients make more money than I do. They just have way too much debt, and they're barely making it. They're just going paycheck to paycheck, and they think, well, it's just for now. It'll get better in the future. It doesn't get better in the future. It gets worse. Because as we take on debt, we're taking future dollars and we're spending them. Right? And so you fast forward to the future, and now you got less money than you had back there because you already spent some of it and took on debt. That's what debt is. You're taking future dollars and you're spending them now. So when you fast forward to the future, things are worse. And that has become the norm in our society. And because that's the norm in our society, we tend to disregard God with regard to our finances. It affects us in way more ways than we know. The Bible talks a lot about debt. I have a whole lesson at Love Inc. that I teach that's all only about debt. Take that guy out. So, tithing proves that you love God. Okay, God tells us in the Bible, Jesus said, John 14, verse 15, if you love me, show it by doing what I've told you to do. And so I'm not going to go over 800 verses, although there is that many, literally. What I want to do is challenge you guys to research it in His Word. If you struggle with it, then join the club, because everybody does. It's extremely hard for us as Christians to surrender our money to God, but it's something He has called us to do. And when you do it, what matters is not the amount. That's the number one question I get. Okay, does it have to be the gross or the net? I don't care, neither should you. And God doesn't even care. He cares about the motivation behind the giving. And it's up to you. You know, I sometimes tell people, hey, you want to tithe on the net, which is only the dollars you receive, fine, but you're not receiving Social Security and Medicare and all these other things and all the taxes. But then when you get a $7,000 tax refund, guess what? I think that that is also increase, because the Bible talks about increase, and that matters. Anytime you financially increase, 10% of it is God's, period. So it depends on how you view your paycheck. If you see the gross as your increase, then yeah, you owe on the gross. If you see the net as your increase, then you owe on the net. Okay, and saying like it's hard for business owners, because there's a lot of expenses to run a business. I'm a dairy farmer, I lose money a lot. Okay, so I have to look at how much it costs to make milk and how much money I actually make, and I have to look at the whole dairy and be like, oh my goodness, I'm losing money on the dairy. But as I take financial draws, as my family increases financially, that is all God's. Or if the accountant says, here's the net profit for the year, that net profit, 10% of that is God's. You have to kind of decide how it works for you. There's no such thing as normal. God doesn't care. He only cares what's in your heart. He only cares about seeing him as he is with regard to your financial decisions. Hope I didn't offend any of you. Let's pray. Dear Lord, we thank you so much for this wonderful Lord's Day. We just thank you for the beautiful sunny weather we ask you to be with us as we go out this week, that we may honor you, that we may make choices that give you glory, that we may further your kingdom with those that we interact with, that we may be not ashamed of the gospel, but share it boldly. We just want to thank you for all the blessings you give us. We thank you for the financial blessings. We ask you to be with each and every one of these families as they leave this building today, that you may help them